Hi, this is Érika from Small Robot Studio. Today I'll teach you how to sculpt and paint realistic eyes in Nomad Sculpt. We'll start with a simple overview of the anatomy that will inform our sculpt. We all know the sclera. This is the white sphere that makes most of the eye. Then we have the iris, the pigmented portion, and the pupil, which is an opening in the middle of the iris. The pupil is controlled by the iris. It can be expanded or contracted to control the amount of light that gets inside. The iris is slightly concave, meaning it curves towards the inside. The eyeball is covered by a thin transparent layer. On top of the iris, this layer is convex. It curves toward the outside, creating a soft bump. This is known as the cornea. The iris is made of two arrangements of fibers, circular and radial. Each makes up a muscle, one in charge of contracting and the other one of dilating the pupil. These muscles overlap in the center region, making it the thickest part of the iris. This area is known as the collarette. You'll commonly see diamond-shaped openings in this overlap. Alright, let's move on to Nomad. Hey, make sure that you are subscribed with notifications on. Otherwise, you might be missing out on the many tutorials that we release for free each week here on YouTube. I'm gonna start with a UV sphere to take advantage of the circular edges. The default resolution is fine, but if you started lower as I usually recommend, you can add subdivision levels for extra resolution. I'll mask an area slightly larger than 1/3 of the eye diameter. Make sure you only mask the front of the mesh. Also, when masking using the selection mask, make sure you are in orthographic view. I'm gonna extract this mask with fill as a closing action. If the result of the extraction is a bit funny, you might need to add resolution to your base. I want the iris of the eye separate from the rest of the eyeball to add as many subdivisions as I want for painting. This is gonna save me lots of unnecessary polygons that I don't need in the sclera. I'm gonna solo the eyeball and reverse the mask to use the gizmo to flatten the surface. Now I'm gonna use the move tool with the fall off set to a circle and the normal mode active. I'll push inward the surface to create a nice concavity. Keep the radius as big as the masked area. I'll now deactivate solo mode to see the iris again. I'm gonna use the exact same tool, make sure that the brush is bigger than the iris, and push it inwards. Adjust the eyeball and the iris so their connection is clean and soft. I find helpful to mask individual edge loops and modify them with the gizmo tool. The objective is to make the connection as seamless as possible. Now for each of the next steps, I'm gonna create a layer to have extra control and show you a non-destructive workflow that allows easy changes. I'll start by creating a pupil layer. Simply go to the layer menu and tap on Add Layer. If you tap on the pencil, you can name your layer. I'll add a couple subdivision levels for extra resolution. I'm gonna mask the inside loops, blur a little bit the mask, and push it back to simulate the opening. I recommend activating the lock so you don't select by mistake the eyeball. If you paint your mask in a lower subdivision level and then go to a higher one, your mask is gonna be automatically blurred. I'm gonna open the painting menu, select a dark color and tap on Paint All. Unlike Force Paint All, this button will respect the mask and apply the paint only on the unmasked area. You can hide the mask by choosing the View tool. Or you can hide the changes that we just made. To hide all of them, go into the layer menu and tap on the eye icon. If you want to hide them individually, tap on the three dots and use the sliders to decrease the changes or hide them completely. Let's move on to the iris. I'm gonna create another layer for the radial fibers and place it underneath the pupil layer. I'm still gonna use the mask that I have, I'm just gonna reverse it. With the clay tool, I'll start sculpting the thin fibers. You can use the tiling method for extra strokes, but be aware of any visible repetitive pattern that may look artificial. Use crease to manually emphasize some fibers. Don't cross from side to side. Make them fade in and out with the texture that you already have. Now for painting, I'm gonna select an average color for the iris and use Force Paint All. This is gonna ignore the alpha, but it's not gonna paint on top of the pupil that we have on a separate layer on top. When you choose your color, go for a neutral average with low saturation. In other words, closer to gray. If you are using a color madcap, change it to a painting one to appreciate the colors with the real value. In this same layer, I'm gonna paint some of the pigmented rings. We're gonna choose colors by varying their brightness, saturation, and temperature. I'm gonna paint with low intensity to let the colors naturally mix together and become harmonious. Once I have the rings, I'm gonna choose smudge and with the strokes follow the direction of the radial fibers. You can even choose one of the default streaky alphas for a few finer defined fibers. And I'm gonna paint a couple more, but I'll try to be conservative to avoid over-rendering. This is where I have the opportunity to add more saturated colors. I'm gonna make yet another layer for the colorette. And I'm gonna paint a mask with its shape. It wouldn't hurt to have an extra subdivision level. And then paint the shape of the colorette. Don't forget to include the diamond shape openings. To get a soft transition, I'm gonna blur part of the mask, but try to rescue some of the harder edges. Now I'm gonna reverse the mask and using clay with subtle intensity, I'm gonna build up this overlap. You can always turn off the paint to focus more on the shapes. If you don't like the strokes that you made and you wanna go back, you can use the delete layer tool and this is gonna reverse whatever action you were doing on this layer. And once I like the shape, I can carry on painting. I am gonna do a long hold on my screen to choose a color that's already there, but I'll modify it to be brighter and more saturated. Repeat the process a couple times, varying the color, and check the result in the view tool to hide the mask. You can also get rid of the mask and carry on painting manually. For the crevices of the colorette, I'm gonna use a darker color. This is gonna make them feel deeper. I'm gonna create one more layer for the final details. I'm just gonna paint and sculpt a couple more individual fibers and add tiny accents of contrast. I like to add the brightest and darkest color right at the end. Think of these details as adding a bit of salt to a dish. Too much salt can spoil it, so be conservative with these details. To finish, I'm gonna switch to PBR shading and paint the eyeball white with the roughness set to 0, so it's reflective. When we are painting with layers, this is where we can control the material qualities and even the intensity of the sculpted texture. Use this to your advantage. You can easily get rid of a layer and redo anything you want without losing the rest of the sculpt. In case you were wondering, I purposefully ignored the cornea, the outer layer of the eyes. Up to March 2021, Nomad Sculpt doesn't support transparent reflective materials like glass, so there's no point in making the cornea. A little advice on stylized designs: you might not need over-realistic eyes, because this might clash with the simplicity of the rest of the design. For my linked sculpt, I simply painted the pigmented rings and radial fibers. Everything else was abstracted. Anyway, here's the final result with the eye within a head so you can see it in context. This is part of my realistic head sculpt course that is available for pre-order now at 25% discount and will be released on April the 1st, 2021. To learn more about it, find the link in the description of this video. Alright, I'll see you soon with a new tutorial. Happy sculpting and painting! That's it for this tutorial. If you find it useful, make sure that you leave a like so other people can find it. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, as we are bringing out CG and illustration tutorials every week. Become a patron and access tutorial assets, bonus content, a private Discord, and more by clicking in the link below.